Welcome back, listeners, to Sandman Stories Presents, a folklore podcast where I read you to sleep or until the next story. I'm your host, Dustin. If you want more Sandman, I have extra stories that are too spicy for the main feed available on my Patreon. You can even join at the free tier and get everything. Today we are back in the book of Louisiana folktales written down by Alcée Fortier. In the first story, we learn about how eavesdropping can lead to romance. In the second, we see what happens when you run away from home. And in the final story, we see how families take care of each other. Okay, let's begin. The statue of St. Anthony. In a small town, there lived a shoemaker who had a beautiful daughter. One day, she saw a young man enter the house next to hers, and soon, she fell in love with him. She asked the old cook what she could do to make this young man fall in love with her. The old woman told her to pray to St. Anthony. So she did, but to little effect. "Perhaps he is deaf," said the cook. "Let's make a hole in his ears." When they were trying to bore a hole in the ears of the wooden statue, the young man's servant came out into the shop. He asked the two women what they were doing. They said they wanted St. Anthony to hear their prayer. The servant made holes in the ears of the statue and waited outside the door to hear what the young girl was so anxious to ask for. As soon as he heard that the young girl was asking St. Anthony to obtain the love of her neighbor for herself, he ran to his master and related the story. The latter felt so much flattered by the love of the young beautiful girl that he fell in love with her, and in turn married her. The end. Okay, and story number 2, The Little Boys and the Giants. Once upon a time, there were two little boys who lived in a house not far from a river. Their parents had forbidden them to ever go near the river. But one day, they ran away, and taking a skiff which was in the river, they rowed and rowed. I believe that they rowed for 1,000,000 miles. When night came, they were very much afraid, and they did not know where to go. While they were looking at a light off in the distance, some giants came to catch them. They climbed up a tree, but the giants merely shook the tree and the poor boys fell down. They were carried to the house of the giants, where they found many other little boys. They were all fed on milk and hominy, so that they might grow fat, and every day a few of the little boys were cooked and eaten by the giants. Not far from the house of the giants lived an old woman who was a witch. One day, the father of the two little boys who had run away came to the old woman's house with his friends and asked her if she had seen his boys. She replied that they were in a house nearby, in front of the door of which was a pebble, not larger than a small marble. The men went to the house and found that the pebble had become a rock as big as a mountain. They had a lot of trouble pushing aside the rock and opening the door, but at last they entered the house, killed the giants, and brought back their little boys. The end. Okay, and the third story, The Men Who Became Birds. Once upon a time, there was a lady who had 12 children, 11 boys and 1 girl. The poor lady died and her husband married again. His second wife was a witch who was very bad. In the daytime, she changed the 11 boys into birds and allowed them to take their human forms only at night. As for the girl, she changed her into one of the black servants that worked at the house. Her father did not recognize the new girl, and so he sent her out of the house. The witch treated her husband's children in that way because she wanted him to leave his money to her own children. When the poor girl was kicked out of her father's house, she went to see her brothers and told them what had happened to her. They said that the next morning they would take her to another country. They made a bed with leaves, and the next day, when they were birds again, each one took a hold of the bed in his beak, and they carried their sister far away into another country. They placed her in a forest and built a pretty little hut for her. One day an old witch passed by the hut, and when she saw the young girl, she asked her what she was doing there. The poor girl related her story, and the witch told her that she could tell her how to turn her brothers into men all the time. She must make a shirt for each of her brothers, and not to sew the shirts, but to weave them, and to not speak until the shirts were ready. It took her a long time to do the work, and when she was almost done, just one shirt was missing one sleeve. Her stepmother found out where she was, and had her arrested as a witch. They were taking her to prison when the 11 brothers flew around the cart. She immediately threw the shirts over them, and they became men again and rescued their sister. As one of the shirts only had one sleeve, the brother who received that shirt had one bird wing for the rest of his life. The end. Ooh, okay, I like the romance in the first one. There are a lot of relics and saints and such in New Orleans, and sometimes the person needing to hear your prayer is sitting close by. Good communication saves relationships. And the second story had a bit of a Hansel and Gretel to it. It's dangerous to run away from home, and especially in a swamp. And the final story was a nice bit of family help. In the original, the witch turns the daughter into a black woman, and it didn't seem to further the story at all, so I changed it up right quick. I like these stories, but this book is almost holed out. In the meantime, I'll look for something else from the Caribbean to fill the gap. And the podcast Shoutout is to the history of China. Hosted by Chris, this is an amazing overview of Chinese history by a guy who really knows his stuff. He moved to China about the same time that I moved to Korea, but he was already fluent in Mandarin. This is a wonderful history podcast, and it will give you a great perspective on Chinese culture through history. And if you love his show as much as I do, go and give him a like, a rating, and a review. And the listener shout out, according to Google, Lausanne is a city on Lake Geneva in the French-speaking region of Vaud, Switzerland. It's home to the International Olympic Committee headquarters, as well as the Olympic Museum and Lakeshore Olympic Park. Away from the lake, the hilly old city has medieval shop-lined streets and a 12th century Gothic cathedral with an ornate facade. The 19th century Palais de Rumine houses fine art and science museums. And it looks like a nice place, but it might be a bit pricey to visit. And so to my listener in Louisiana, I say, merci et bonne nuit. Thank you, and good night.